Richard Sloggett is a former special advisor to the Health Secretary Matt Hancock and a senior fellow at Policy Exchange's Health and Social Care Unit. Dr Bob Gill is a GP based in South East London, producer of the crowd-funded documentary The Great NHS Heist. Evening to you both, gents. Let me start with you, Richard. Clearly, the US want total market access. That is absolutely true, isn't it?
Well, I think the dossier shows today that that is the starting point for the US part of the negotiations. But I think it's also quite clear that from the UK government's perspective that there is absolutely no appetite for having that on the table in any negotiation or discussion.
But the denials previously
that's also quite clear in the Conservative manifesto on page 11, where it actually sort of dictates that. So I think the other thing worth saying with this is these are the initial exchanges between the two sides before formal trade talks start, and it's not a particular surprise to see that the Americans would want to put drug pricing on the table. That doesn't mean that the UK government needs to accept that.
So drug pricing and the NHS is on the table.
No, it's not on the table. I think the Americans have said
it is on the table. It's in the documents. That's what the US want.
Well, I think that's what the Americans want. But I think, as you've heard from the clips that you've played and from the manifesto statement that I've sort of repeated, I think that it's quite clear that the government has basically said that the NHS and drug pricing is not on the table. So it probably comes back to your overall point about who you believe in that. But I think it's quite clear from the dossier that there is no engagement. And Barry Gardner, I think, was on television earlier saying that there is no indication that the UK government has actually stepped forward and said that we will have these discussions. But it's not a surprise, Tom, that the Americans, from their own negotiating perspective, are saying that they want to have this discussion. It doesn't mean that the other side is going to engage in it.
Dr Bob Gill, where do these documents show that the UK government has sold the NHS to Donald Trump?
Well, you can't look at these documents in isolation, although it does confirm that Boris has been lying that even the NHS is being negotiated.
Well, let's pause on that for a moment, and I promise you we'll come to that. But where does it say in these documents that ministers of this government have sold the NHS or about to sell the NHS to Donald Trump?
Well, they're certainly selling the nation down the river, and if you let me explain it, I can't give you a soundbite. It needs a bit of explanation. What we have is legislation, the 2012 Health and Social Care Act, which was 500 pages of competition law. We do not need 500 pages of competition law to run a public service. What they have done is enabled, first of all, 49% of every hospital trust in this country's income to be generated from private patients. What they are also doing, they've broken up the NHS, they've restructured it to along the lines of American-style insurance pools. These are called clinical commissioning groups. They've completely trashed the original structure of the NHS. They've set it up as insurance pools, and we have the Naylor Review, which is incentivizing hospital trusts to flog off the land. So you
think this is just a sign of things to come? This is the next stage of what you see as rampant privatisation, correct?
Yes, they're just liberating the big pharma to run riot in this country is just one element of it.
But to be fair, Dr Gill, just to come back to my original question, I'm grateful for the context around it. There is nowhere in this document that it says that government ministers have sold the NHS to Donald Trump.
It's a negotiation. The Americans want full access for their hyperinflated drug prices to be sold to the NHS for as much as they can get for it. And what that will do, it will have a massive opportunity cost in terms of spend on health. So more will be drained into the costs of the big pharma companies.
Go on, Richard.
Because I'm still not quite clear on this. I mean, I think if the Americans did want full market access and did want to charge the prices they wanted to charge, it would be very odd for a government of any colour, whether it be Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat or whoever, to then accept that, because the UK government as a single national payer system is the ultimate sort of funder of the health service. So they'd be ultimately paying themselves out of taxation to cover that cost. So I'm not sure what interest there would be for the government to then actually sort of accept those terms. And then
because the government hasn't been acting in the public interest, has it? That's exactly what's going on here. They're not acting in the public interest.
Even if they did accept those terms, which would be sort of non-favourable to them, then you will get into a sort of strange situation where American drugs will be priced at one level, and then other products say, European or UK products would be charged at a different level. So if you take a class of medicine, for example, where there are a class of disease, where there are several medicines you can use which are similar, it doesn't force the NHS, the trade doesn't force the NHS to prescribe products. Clinicians in the NHS will be well within their rights to say, well, we won't prescribe that American product because it's too expensive, we'll prescribe something else. So there's a kind of sort of strange thing going on here where I find it very odd if the UK government would basically add a load of additional cost to the system, and then there's still a set of decisions the NHS would then have to take, which it wouldn't necessarily be forced to, around which products it would prescribe. So I still haven't seen any of these documents that would indicate that would be the case.
And Dr. Gill, you think that is what a Conservative government would do. Why?
Well, your other commentators making two very wrong assumptions. First, that the government is acting in a rational way. Second, that the government is acting in the public interest.
Hang on, Dr. Gill. Just to be absolutely clear about what you're saying, You're suggesting that a Conservative government, led by Boris Johnson, would choose to put up drug prices and pay for the increase in drug prices through either borrowing or taxation or something in order to get a trade deal with Donald Trump.
Absolutely, spot on. He's acting in the interest of overseas corporations above the interest of the British public. Absolutely right. You've got it.
I just think, given the level of public support for the NHS politically, that would be unbelievable naive.
Well, that's why they're lying through their teeth. They will continue to lie through their teeth until it's done.
Can I ask where the evidence for that is? Where is the evidence that a Conservative Prime Minister in the shape of Boris Johnson would do that?
Well, whatever shape it is, whether Boris Johnson or some other corporate lackey, they are acting in the interest of American corporations. They're lying about it. They're doing secret trade deals.
The political reality is it would be catastrophic politically for any party, whoever the corporate lackey is in charge of it at any given moment, to start increasing drugs prices for the NHS on the basis of a trade deal that they've negotiated. It would be a disaster.
Okay, so, when politicians have made disastrous policy decisions, can you tell me what personal accountability or sanction that
well, they normally lose office.
And since when did that bother Tony Blair? He's gone on to make multiple hundreds of millions of pounds, after taking the country into an illegal war. Since when did that prevent politicians acting against the public interest? I'm giving you an example. What the government is doing is handing over our public services and the budgets that go with them to American corporations.
OK, Dr. Gill, thank you. Dr. Bob Gill, a GP in South East London, producer of the crowd-funded documentary The Great NHS Heist. And Richard, thank you to you too. Richard Sloggett, former special advisor to the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, senior fellow at the Policy Exchange's Health and Social Care Unit.